The lower decks of Horizon's Edge space station smelled like engine oil and burnt metal. It was not a pleasant smell, but Tiho had grown used to it after 3 years. His small repair shop sat between a food vendor that sold strange purple noodles and a weapons dealer who never smiled. Nobody came to this part of the station unless they had no other choice. Tiho wiped his hands on a dirty cloth and looked at the broken engine part on his workbench. It belonged to a small cargo ship, and the owner had promised to pay him tomorrow. Tomorrow never seemed to come for most of his customers, but Tiho fixed things anyway. It was what he was good at. He was 28 years old, born on Earth in a small city called Busan. His grandmother had taught him to fix electronics in her tiny shop when he was just a boy. She always said that hands that could repair things would never go hungry. Tiho hoped she was right, because right now he was very hungry. The door to his shop slid open with a rough sound. Tiho looked up and felt his heart jump in his chest. A Velanthi warrior stood in his doorway. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with silver-blue skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. Her eyes were dark purple, and they looked at him like he was an insect she might step on. She wore armor that covered most of her body, black and silver plates that moved with her like a second skin. But something was wrong with the armor. Sparks flew from a large crack across her chest, and Tiho could see exposed wires underneath. "You are the human mechanic," she said. It was not a question. Tiho stood up slowly. He had seen Velanthi before, but always from far away. They were warriors, proud and dangerous. Most of them thought humans were primitive creatures who had no business being in space. Humans had only joined the galactic community 60 years ago, after all. To species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. "I am," Tiho said. "Can I help you?" The Velanthi woman stepped inside. Up close, she was even more impressive. Her face was sharp and beautiful in a way that was not quite human. 3 small marks ran down her left cheek, like scars or maybe decorations. Tiho did not know enough about Velanthi culture to tell the difference. "My armor is damaged," she said. "I need it repaired." Tiho looked at the sparking crack on her chest plate. Velanthi armor was famous across the galaxy. It was not just metal and circuits. It was woven with something called bioneural threading, a technology that connected directly to the wearer's nervous system. The armor could feel what the warrior felt. It could react faster than thought, and it was almost impossible to repair. "I can see that," Tiho said carefully. "But Velanthi armor is very complex. There are specialized mechanics on the upper decks who know this technology better than I do." The woman's purple eyes narrowed. "I have been to them, all of them. They refused." "Refused? Why?" "Because the damage is too severe. Because they are afraid to make it worse. Because they are cowards." She spoke the last word with disgust. Tiho understood. Velanthi armor was expensive, worth more than most ships. If a mechanic damaged it further while trying to repair it, they would owe a debt they could never pay. Most mechanics were smart enough to refuse the risk. But Tiho was not most mechanics. He was a human who lived in the lower decks, who ate 1 meal a day when business was bad, who had nothing to lose. "Let me take a look," he said. The woman seemed surprised. She had expected him to refuse like the others. For a moment, something flickered in her cold eyes. Then she nodded and walked to his workbench. Tiho pulled over a bright lamp and leaned close to examine the damage. The crack ran from her shoulder down to the center of her chest. The outer plates were broken, but that was not the real problem. The bioneural circuits underneath were torn and tangled, sparking with unstable energy. "What happened?" Tiho asked as he studied the damage. "A fight," the woman said simply. Tiho did not ask for more details. In this part of the station, people did not share their stories, and smart men did not ask questions. He reached out carefully and touched the edge of the broken plate. The Velanthi woman tensed but did not move away. Tiho could feel a strange warmth coming from the circuits, like they were alive somehow. He supposed they were, in a way, connected to her body, part of her nervous system. The circuits looked like nothing he had ever seen before. They were thin as spider silk, glowing with faint blue light. They twisted and connected in patterns that seemed random at first. But as Tiho looked closer, he began to see something familiar. Back on Earth, his grandmother had taught him about neural networks, old technology from before humans went to space. The patterns were similar. Not the same, but similar enough that Tiho could understand the logic behind them. "I can fix this," he said, surprising himself. The Valanthi woman looked at him with those cold purple eyes. "You are certain?" "No," Tiho admitted honestly, "but I think I understand how it works. I can try." She studied him for a long moment. Tiho felt like she was looking through him, seeing something that others could not see. Then she gave a single sharp nod. "My name is Yuna," she said. "I command a mercenary ship called the Silent Blade. If you can repair my armor, I will pay you well. If you damage it further, I will end your life. Is this acceptable?" Tiho swallowed hard. His grandmother had never mentioned anything like this in her lessons about repair work. "Acceptable," he said, because what else could he say? Yuna sat down on the metal chair next to his workbench. It was too small for her tall frame, but she made it look like a throne. She watched as Tiho gathered his tools, selecting the smallest and most precise ones he had. "The other mechanics were afraid to even touch it," Yuna said. "You are not afraid." Tiho looked at the damaged armor, at the complex alien circuits that most humans would never understand. He thought about his grandmother's shop, about the long hours spent learning to fix things that everyone else said were broken beyond repair. "Should I be?" he asked. For the first time, something that might have been interest flickered across Yuna's cold face. She leaned back in the chair and crossed her arms. "We will see, human, we will see." Tiho took a deep breath and began to work. The station hummed around them, thousands of aliens living their lives, completely unaware that in a small repair shop in the lower decks, a human mechanic was about to do something impossible. His steady hands moved carefully over the damaged circuits, and Yuna watched every movement with those unreadable purple eyes. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the universe waited to see what would happen next. The repair took hours. Tiho lost track of time as he worked, his entire world shrinking down to the damaged circuits beneath his fingers. Yuna sat perfectly still, watching him with those cold purple eyes that never seemed to blink. Tiho had removed part of the outer armor plates to reach the bioneural threading underneath. The circuits were beautiful in a strange way, thin lines of light that pulsed like veins carrying blood. But many of them were broken, disconnected, or tangled together in ways that made no sense. "The specialists on the upper decks have studied Valanthi armor for decades," Yuna said, breaking the silence for the first time in an hour. "They have advanced tools and years of training. You have a small shop in the lower decks and tools that look older than you are. Why do you think you can succeed where they failed?" Tiho did not look up from his work. He was carefully separating two circuits that had fused together during the damage. It required a steady hand and complete focus. "I do not think," he said. "I just try." Yuna made a sound that might have been amusement, a strange philosophy for a mechanic. "My grandmother taught me," Tiho explained. He found himself talking as he worked, something he often did when repairs were difficult. It helped him focus. She had a small electronics shop in Busan. That is a city on Earth. People brought her things that were broken beyond repair, screens that would never light up again, machines that had been dead for years. She fixed most of them. "How?" She said that everything wants to work. Machines are built to function. When they break, they are waiting for someone to help them work again. You just have to listen to what they need. Tiho reconnected a circuit and felt it pulse with energy under his touch. The armor was starting to respond to his repairs. He could feel it warming slightly, coming back to life. And you believe this applies to Valanthi bioneural armor? Yuna asked. There was something in her voice now, not mockery but genuine curiosity. The technology is different, Tiho admitted. But the principle is the same. Your armor wants to work. It is connected to you, part of your nervous system. Right now, it is confused because the circuits are damaged. I just need to show it the correct paths again. He reached a section where multiple circuits came together in a complex pattern. This was the most damaged area, right over the center of Yuna's chest. The circuits here were connected directly to her heart rhythms, monitoring and protecting her most vital organs. This part will be difficult, Tiho said. The damage is deep. I may need to touch the primary interface. Yuna nodded slowly. The primary interface connects directly to my nervous system. Any mistake there would be unpleasant for me. Tiho understood what she meant. Pain, possibly serious harm. This was why the other mechanics had refused. One wrong move and he could send a surge of energy directly into her nervous system. I will be careful, he said. See that you are. Tiho leaned closer to examine the primary interface. His face was very close to Yuna's chest now, close enough to see the faint scars on her silver-blue skin, close enough to notice that she smelled like something electric and metallic, like a lightning storm over an ocean. The circuits around the interface were a tangled mess, but as Tiho looked at them, he began to see patterns. These were not random tangles. They were connections that had broken and reformed incorrectly during the damage, like a river that had been blocked and found new paths, wrong paths that led nowhere. He needed to break those wrong connections and remake the correct ones. But to do that, he would have to work directly on the interface while it was still connected to Yuna. I need to access the interface directly, Tiho said. You will feel what I am doing. It may be uncomfortable. Yuna looked at him with an expression he could not read. Then she leaned slightly closer, giving him better access to the damaged area. Go on, human, she said. Her voice was low and strange, almost soft. Do not stop. Tiho felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his hands steady. That was the important thing. Steady hands. His grandmother had always said that steady hands could fix anything. He began working on the interface, gently breaking the wrong connections and rebuilding the correct ones. Yuna's body tensed beside him, and he knew she could feel every movement. The interface transmitted his touch directly to her nervous system. It must have been strange, feeling a stranger's hands inside her armor, inside the circuits that were part of her. Tell me, Yuna said suddenly, why are you here? Why is a human mechanic working in the lowest part of a station where most species think humans are barely more than animals? Tiho kept working as he answered. I came to space because I wanted to see the stars. Everyone on Earth dreams of space, but few of us get to go. I saved money for 10 years, working in my grandmother's shop, fixing anything people brought me. When I finally had enough for a ticket, I came to the nearest station and looked for work. And you found this place? Yes. No one on the upper decks would hire a human. They said our technology was too primitive, that we could not understand advanced systems. So I came down here, where people ask fewer questions. But you do understand, Yuna said. You understand my armor better than the specialists who trained for decades. How is this possible? Tiho finished reconnecting a circuit and paused for a moment. He had been asking himself the same question. I do not know, he admitted. Maybe it is because I do not know what is supposed to be impossible. The specialists looked at your armor and saw Valanthi technology, something they had been taught was too complex for humans. I just look at it and see a broken thing that wants to work again. He connected another circuit and Yuna drew a sharp breath. That one was sensitive. Sorry. Do not apologize, continue. Tiho worked for another hour. His fingers moved with increasing confidence as he understood more and more of the armor's design. It was brilliant technology, far beyond anything humans had created. But the principles were the same principles his grandmother had taught him. Everything wanted to work. You just had to help it. Finally, he connected the last broken circuit. The armor pulsed with bright blue light for a moment, then settled into a steady, healthy glow. The crack on the outer plates was still visible, but the internal damage was repaired. "I have fixed the circuits," Tiho said. "The outer plates will need to be replaced, but that is simple metalwork. The important part is done. Your armor should function normally now." Yuna stood up slowly. She was a full head taller than Tiho, and she looked down at him with an expression he could not read. Then she flexed her arms, twisted her body, testing the armor's response. Blue light rippled across the plates as the bioneural circuits responded to her movements. "It feels better than before the damage," she said. There was wonder in her voice. "The response time is faster. The circuits are cleaner." Tiho nodded. He had noticed some inefficiencies in the original wiring while he worked and had corrected them. It had seemed like the natural thing to do. "What do I owe you?" Yuna asked. Tiho thought about it. Normal armor repairs cost a few hundred credits, but this was Velanthi bioneural armor, the most advanced technology in the galaxy. He had done what specialized mechanics said was impossible. 200 credits, he said. Yuna stared at him. 200 credits. I paid more than that for the meal I ate before coming here. I do not need more, Tiho said simply. Yuna reached into a compartment on her armor and pulled out a small data chip. She pressed it into Tiho's hand. There are 600 credits on this chip. You will take them. Tiho tried to protest, but Yuna's look silenced him. It was not anger. It was something else, something he could not identify. You have earned this, she said, and perhaps more. She walked to the door of his shop, her repaired armor moving smoothly with every step. At the doorway, she paused and looked back at him. Goodbye, human mechanic. I will remember your steady hands. Then she was gone, disappearing into the crowds of the lower decks. Tiho stood alone in his shop, holding 600 credits and wondering what had just happened. Outside, the station hummed its endless mechanical song, and somewhere among the stars, Yuna returned to her ship with armor that worked better than ever before. And Tiho, for the first time in years, was no longer hungry. 3 weeks passed, and everything changed. It started slowly. A Keithrani cargo captain came to Tiho's shop, a large creature with rough gray skin and 4 arms. He had heard from someone who had heard from someone else that a human mechanic in the lower decks had fixed unfixable Velanthi armor. The captain needed his ship's engine repaired. It was old technology from a species that no longer existed, and every mechanic on the station had said it could not be fixed. Tiho fixed it in 2 days. Then came a Morvani diplomat, a small being with large eyes and delicate hands. She carried a metal box that contained a device passed down through her family for generations. It had stopped working 50 years ago, and no one knew what it was supposed to do anymore. She just wanted it to work again, for her grandfather's memory. Tiho opened the box, studied the device, and recognized it as a kind of music player. He repaired the broken components and returned it to the diplomat. When she pressed the activation button and heard her great-great-grandmother's voice singing a song from her home world, she cried. She paid Tiho more money than he had ever seen. Word spread faster after that. The human mechanic in the lower decks could fix anything. He could understand technology that he had never seen before. He could repair machines that experts said were broken forever, and he charged fair prices, never trying to cheat his customers. Tiho's small shop became crowded with clients. Species that had once walked past him without looking now waited in line for hours. He hired an assistant, a young Keithrani named Bora who had 4 hands and could hold tools while Tiho worked. Business was good. Life was good. But not everyone was happy about Tiho's success. Doxu was a Velanthi mechanic who worked on the middle decks. He was tall like all Velanthe, but where Yuna was strong and cold, Doxu was thin and bitter. For 20 years, he had been the station's best mechanic for advanced technology. Clients came to him because there was no one better. Now they were going to a human, a primitive species that had barely learned to travel between stars. It was an insult. It was a humiliation, and Doxu would not accept it. He started small, spreading rumors that Tiho stole alien technology, that his repairs would fail after a few months, that he was a spy for the human government, learning secrets from every device he touched. Some people believed these rumors. Most did not because Tiho's repairs continued to work perfectly. So Doxu tried something more direct. One night, Tiho returned to his shop to find his workbench destroyed. His tools were scattered across the floor, many of them broken. His supply of spare parts had been scattered and mixed together, weeks of organization ruined in minutes. Bora stood in the middle of the destruction, her 4 hands clenched into fists. 3 Velanthe came, she said. They wore masks. They did not speak. They just destroyed everything and left. Tiho looked at his ruined shop and felt something cold settle in his chest. He had worked so hard to build this place. Now it would take months to replace his tools, to reorganize his supplies, and he knew this would not be the last attack. "Go home, Bora," he said quietly. "I will clean this up." Bora wanted to argue, but something in Tiho's voice stopped her. She nodded and left, looking back at him with worried eyes. Tiho spent the night cleaning. He salvaged what tools he could and made a list of what needed to be replaced. By morning, his shop looked almost normal again, though emptier than before. He was sitting on his workbench, exhausted, when the door slid open and Yuna walked in. She looked the same as before, tall and beautiful and cold. Her armor was perfect now, every plate polished and gleaming. She looked around the shop with her purple eyes and saw the empty spaces where tools used to be. "You have been visited," she said. It was not a question. "How did you know?" "I hear things." Yuna walked closer, her boots clicking on the metal floor. "A Velanthe mechanic named Doxu has been talking about you, saying that humans are thieves and spies, saying that someone should teach you a lesson." Tiho felt tired. He had not slept all night, and now this. "Doxu, I do not know him." "You do not need to know him. He knows you. You have taken his customers, his reputation. In his mind, you have stolen his honor." Yuna's voice was flat, stating facts without emotion. "He will not stop with breaking your tools." "What do you suggest I do? Run away?" "That would be the smart choice. Leave the station. Find another place to work. Doxu has friends in dangerous places. He can make your life very difficult here." Tiho thought about it. He thought about his grandmother's shop back on Earth, about the years he had spent saving money to reach the stars. He thought about the clients who had trusted him with their precious machines, the Morvani diplomat who had cried when she heard her ancestor's voice. "No," he said. Yuna raised an eyebrow. "No. I am not running. I have finally built something here. People trust me. I will not abandon that because one bitter man thinks I do not belong." For a long moment, Yuna said nothing. She just looked at him with those unreadable purple eyes. Then something shifted in her expression, something that might have been respect. "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said. "Probably both." Yuna made that sound again, the one that might have been amusement. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from Tiho, crossing her long legs. "Tell me more about this shop of yours. Tell me about the clients who come here." Tiho did not understand why she wanted to know, but he told her. He told her about the Keithrani captain and his ancient engine, about the Morvani diplomat and her family's music player, about the dozens of other beings who had come to him with broken things and left with them working again. Yuna listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "You have built something valuable," she said. "Not just a business, but a reputation, trust. These things are rare in this station." Is that why you are here? To tell me what I already know? No, Yuna stood up and walked to the door. I am here because I heard what Doxu is planning next. He has hired mercenaries. Real ones, not the simple thugs who broke your tools. They are coming for you tonight. Tiho felt the cold in his chest grow colder. Why are you warning me? Yuna paused at the door. She did not turn around. Because you fixed my armor when no one else would try. Because you charged me a fair price when you could have asked for 10 times more. Because your hands were steady when they should have been shaking. She looked back at him over her shoulder. I pay my debts, human. You should leave this place before nightfall. I already told you, I am not running. Yuna's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Then I will stay. What? My crew can be here in 2 hours. We will make sure Doxu's mercenaries fail. She turned to face him fully. Unless you object to help from a Velanthe. Tiho looked at this strange, cold warrior who had come to warn him, to protect him. He did not understand why she cared, but right now he was too tired to ask questions. I do not object, he said. Yuna nodded once. Then she pulled out a communication device and spoke into it with rapid words in a language Tiho did not understand. When she finished, she put the device away and sat down again. Now we wait, she said. Tell me more about your grandmother. I wish to understand how a human learned to fix Velanthe armor. And so Tiho told her, while outside the window, the station's artificial sun began to set, and somewhere in the shadows, dangerous men prepared for violence. Yuna's crew arrived 2 hours later, just as she had promised. Hana was a Velanthe like Yuna, but shorter and wider, with muscles that showed through her armor. Her skin was a darker shade of blue, and her eyes were green instead of purple. She carried 2 weapons on her hips and looked like she knew how to use them. Jinho was a surprise. He was human, maybe a few years younger than Tiho, with a quick smile and nervous energy. He talked fast and moved faster, his eyes always looking around as if expecting trouble. So you are the famous mechanic, Jinho said, shaking Tiho's hand. The human who fixed Velanthe armor. You have no idea how much trouble you have caused. Every human on this station has been talking about you. They say you are making us look good for once. Tiho did not know what to say to that. He had never thought of himself as representing all humans. He was just a mechanic who fixed things. Enough talking, Hana said. Her voice was rough and deep. The mercenaries will come after dark. We need to prepare. They spent the next few hours preparing. Hana positioned herself near the back of the shop, hidden behind a stack of engine parts. Jinho watched the entrance, his hand resting on a weapon he clearly hoped he would not have to use. Yuna stayed close to Tiho, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. You should hide somewhere safe, Yuna told him. When the fighting starts, stay down and let us handle it. But Tiho was not listening. He was looking at the walls of his shop, at the electrical panels and power conduits that ran throughout the lower decks. He had repaired most of them himself over the past 3 years. He knew every wire, every circuit, every system in this section of the station. I have an idea, he said. What kind of idea? Yuna asked. Tiho pulled open one of the wall panels and looked at the circuits inside. This station is old. The systems are connected in ways the original builders never intended. I have spent 3 years learning these connections, fixing problems that nobody else could understand. And I can use them. The lights, the doors, the gravity generators in this section, they all run through my shop. I can control them. Yuna looked at him with new interest. You can control the station's systems. Not all of them, just this section, just the parts I have repaired. Tiho began pulling wires, reconnecting them in new patterns. When the mercenaries come, I can make the station fight for us. Hana laughed from her hiding spot. It was a harsh sound. The little human wants to use the station as a weapon. I like it. They worked together for another hour. Tiho showed them what he planned to do, and they adjusted their positions to take advantage of it. By the time the station's artificial lights dimmed to simulate night, they were ready. The mercenaries came just after midnight. There were 6 of them, all Velanthi, all wearing heavy armor and carrying serious weapons. They moved silently through the lower decks, confident and professional. They had been told this would be easy. One human mechanic, alone and unprotected. A simple job. They did not know about Yuna and her crew. They did not know about Tiho's preparations. They did not know what was waiting for them. The first mercenary reached the door of Tiho's shop and raised his weapon to blast it open. The door opened before he could fire, and the sudden movement surprised him. He stepped inside, and the floor beneath him suddenly had no gravity. He floated up toward the ceiling, confused and helpless. Tiho had disconnected the gravity generator for the first 3 meters of his shop. The mercenary drifted upward, unable to control his movement, an easy target. Hana took him down with one shot. The other mercenaries rushed inside, but the shop had become a trap. Lights flickered on and off in patterns that blinded them. Doors opened and closed at random, separating them from each other. The temperature dropped suddenly in one area, then spiked in another, confusing their armor's sensors. Jinho fired from his position near the entrance, keeping 2 mercenaries pinned behind a workbench. Yuna moved like water, fast and deadly, her weapons finding targets with terrible precision. Hana held the back of the shop, a wall of muscle and fury that no one could pass. And Tiho sat at his workbench, his hands moving over a makeshift control panel, conducting the chaos like a musician conducting an orchestra. But the mercenaries were professionals. They adapted quickly, learning to ignore the flickering lights and unstable gravity. 3 of them were down, but 3 still remained, and they were angry. One of them broke through Jinho's fire and came straight for Tiho. He was huge, even for a Velanthi, with scars on his face and murder in his eyes. "Little human," he growled. "You think you are clever, you think your tricks will save you." Tiho looked at him and felt fear. Real fear, the kind that makes your hands shake and your heart stop. But he remembered his grandmother's words. Steady hands can fix anything. "I am not trying to be clever," Tiho said. "I am just trying to survive." He pressed a button on his control panel. The mercenary's armor suddenly locked up, every joint freezing in place. The Velanthi tried to move, tried to raise his weapon, but his own armor had become a prison. "What did you do?" the mercenary screamed. "Your armor has a safety feature," Tiho explained. He stood up slowly, facing the frozen warrior. "If it detects a dangerous power surge, it locks up to protect the wearer. I just told it that there was a surge coming." How do you know our technology?" Tiho thought about Yuna's armor, about the hours he had spent learning its secrets. "I fixed armor like yours. I learned how it works, and now I am using that knowledge against you." The mercenary's eyes burned with rage, but he could not move. Yuna appeared beside Tiho, her weapon pointed at the frozen warrior's head. "Smart," she said, and there was real admiration in her voice. The remaining mercenaries saw their leader frozen and their comrades fallen. They could have kept fighting, but they knew when a battle was lost. They retreated, disappearing into the darkness of the lower decks. But the fight was not over. One more person stepped into Tiho's shop. Daksu. He was thinner than Tiho expected, tall and elegant in a way that made Yuna look almost brutish. His armor was beautifully made, better than any of the mercenaries. He looked at the fallen warriors, at the frozen leader, at the human mechanic who had defeated his carefully planned attack. "You," Daksu said, his voice full of disgust. "You are nothing, a primitive creature playing with tools you do not understand. How dare you come to this station and steal what is mine?" "I have stolen nothing," Tiho replied. "I just fix things, that is all I have ever done." "You have stolen my customers, my reputation, my honor." Doxu walked closer, his movements graceful and dangerous. I have spent 20 years building my place on this station. I will not let a human take it from me. Yuna stepped forward, putting herself between Doxu and Tiho. You are outnumbered. Your mercenaries are defeated. Walk away, Doxu. Walk away, Doxu laughed. It was an ugly sound. Do you know who I am? I have friends on the station council. I have connections that go all the way to the Velanthe homeworld. You cannot touch me. Maybe not, Tiho said, stepping around Yuna, but I can touch your armor. Doxu froze. What did you say? Your armor. I can see it is the same model as Yuna's, the same bioneural circuits, the same safety features. Tiho walked toward Doxu, his hands steady, his voice calm. I learned every weakness of that armor when I repaired Yuna's. I know exactly how to shut it down. Doxu's confidence flickered. You are bluffing. Am I? Tiho reached out and touched the edge of Doxu's chest plate. Should we find out? The two of them stood there face to face. The human mechanic and the Velanthe master, separated by years of technology and evolution and pride. But in that moment, Tiho was not thinking about any of that. He was just listening like his grandmother had taught him, listening to what was needed. Doxu needed to understand that humans were not primitive, that they learned, adapted, and found ways to win that other species never expected. Your mercenaries failed because they thought this would be easy, Tiho said quietly. You failed because you thought I was weak, but humans are not weak, Doxu. We just look that way to people who do not know better. He pulled his hand back from the armor. Go home. Tell your friends on the council whatever story makes you feel better, but do not come after me again. Because next time, I will not just freeze your armor. I will take it apart piece by piece, and I will make sure the entire station knows that a human mechanic defeated the great Doxu. Doxu stared at him with hatred burning in his eyes. For a long moment, Tiho thought he would attack anyway, would rather die than accept defeat from a human. But Doxu was a survivor. He knew when he had lost. This is not over, he hissed. Yes, it is, Yuna said. Leave now. Doxu turned and walked out of the shop. His movements were stiff with rage, but he did not look back. The frozen mercenary remained where he stood, unable to move, watching his employer abandon him. Tiho let out a breath he had not known he was holding. His hands were shaking now that the danger was past. Steady hands, he thought. They were only steady when it mattered. Yuna put a hand on his shoulder. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily. You did well, human, she said. Very well indeed. Jinho and Hana gathered around them, their faces showing a mixture of relief and excitement. They had won. Against all odds, against professional mercenaries, against a powerful enemy with connections everywhere, they had won. And in the center of it all stood a human mechanic with steady hands and a grandmother's wisdom, who had just proved that his species was not as primitive as everyone thought. 1 month had passed since the night of the attack. The lower decks of Horizon's Edge looked the same as always, full of smoke and noise and beings from 100 different worlds. But everything had changed for Tiho. Doxu had been arrested 3 days after the attack. The mercenary leader, once his armor unlocked, had told the station security everything. He was a survivor too, and he had no loyalty to a man who had abandoned him. Doxu was now sitting in a cell on the upper decks, waiting for transport to a prison world. Tiho's shop was busier than ever. Word of the attack had spread across the station, and with it, a new story. The human mechanic who had turned the station itself against professional mercenaries. The human who had defeated a Velanthe master through knowledge and cleverness instead of violence. Species that had once looked down on humans now spoke about them with caution. If one human could do such things, what could others accomplish? The question spread from Horizon's Edge to other stations, to other worlds. Humans were no longer just the newest species in the galaxy. They were something else, something worth paying attention to. Tiho tried not to think about any of this as he worked. He was the same mechanic he had always been, fixing broken things one at a time. The fame and the stories meant nothing compared to the feeling of a repaired engine humming to life, or a family heirloom working again after decades of silence. But some changes were impossible to ignore. The Galactic Trade Council had sent a representative to meet with him, a small being with silver skin and large eyes who spoke with great formality. "The Council has observed your work with great interest," the representative said. "Your understanding of diverse technologies is unprecedented for a human. We would like to offer you a position as a technical consultant. You would travel to different worlds, solving problems that local experts cannot solve. The pay would be substantial." Tiho thought about it. It was a great honor, the kind of opportunity that humans never received. He would have steady work, respect, and more money than he could ever spend. "Can I think about it?" he asked. The representative nodded. "We will await your decision." After the representative left, Tiho sat alone in his shop and looked around at the place he had built. The workbench where he had repaired Yuna's armor. The wall panels he had opened so many times, learning the station's secrets. The chair where Bora sat when she was helping him, her 4 hands always busy. This was his home, the first real home he had found since leaving Earth. Could he give it up for a job, even a job as important as this one? He was still thinking about it when the door slid open and Yuna walked in. She came to visit often now, though she never said why. Sometimes she needed repairs on her armor or her crew's equipment. Sometimes she just sat and watched him work, asking questions about his grandmother or his life on Earth. Tiho had given up trying to understand her reasons. He just enjoyed her company. Today she looked different, not nervous exactly. Yuna was never nervous, but there was something uncertain in her eyes that Tiho had never seen before. "I heard about the Council's offer," she said. "Word travels fast on this station." "News to me," Tiho said. "I only heard about it an hour ago." "Will you accept?" Tiho leaned back against his workbench. "I do not know. It is a good offer. Important work, good pay, respect from species who usually ignore humans. My grandmother would have been proud." Yuna nodded slowly. She walked around the shop, touching the tools and equipment, trailing her fingers over surfaces she had touched a dozen times before. "I have a different offer," she said finally. Tiho raised an eyebrow. "Oh." "My ship needs a mechanic, a permanent one, someone who can keep our equipment running no matter what the galaxy throws at us." Yuna stopped walking and faced him. "Someone who is not afraid to work close." Tiho felt his heart beat faster. "You want me to join your crew?" "I am offering you a position on the Silent Blade. You would have your own workshop in the cargo bay. You would travel with us, see different worlds, face different challenges." Yuna paused. "It would be dangerous work. No stability. Nothing like the comfortable life the Council is offering." "Why me?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Tiho had ever heard it. "Because you fixed my armor when everyone else said it was impossible. Because you stood up to Doxu when you should have run away. Because your hands are steady when they should be shaking." She met his eyes. "Because in all my years of traveling the galaxy, I have never met anyone quite like you." Tiho looked at her, this strange and beautiful warrior who had walked into his shop looking for a repair and somehow become something more. He thought about the Council's offer, the safe and respectable path. Then he thought about the stars, the unknown worlds, the adventures that waited in the darkness between them. "When do we leave?" he asked. Something changed in Yuna's face. It took Tiho a moment to realize what it was. She was smiling. A real smile, rare and genuine, that transformed her cold features into something warm. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "Can you be ready?" Tiho looked around his shop one last time. At the tools his grandmother had taught him to use, at the workbench where he had built his reputation, at the life he was about to leave behind. "I can be ready," he said. The next morning, Tiho stood in the cargo bay of the Silent Blade, setting up his new workshop. It was smaller than his shop on the station, but it was his. Yuna had given him a corner of the bay, and he was already filling it with his most important tools. Jinho wandered over, that quick smile on his face as always. "Welcome aboard, fellow human. It is good to have another one of us here. Now we almost have enough for a proper card game." Hana appeared behind him, her green eyes studying Tiho with something that might have been approval. "Can you really fix anything? That is what they say about you." "I can try," Tiho said. "That is all anyone can do." "Good enough for me." Hana walked away, and Tiho had the feeling he had passed some kind of test. He spent the rest of the day organizing his workshop, finding places for all his tools and supplies. By evening, it looked almost like his old shop, just smaller and surrounded by the hum of a starship instead of a space station. Yuna came to check on him, as the artificial lights dimmed to simulate night. "The ship makes a strange sound when it accelerates," Tiho said without looking up from his work. "A kind of rattling from the port engine. I can look at it tomorrow if you want." Yuna smiled again, that rare expression that Tiho was starting to hope he would see more often. "I knew hearing you was a good decision." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Tiho." He looked up. It was the first time she had used his name. "Welcome to the crew," she said. Then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Tiho stood alone in his new workshop, surrounded by tools and possibilities, and felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The ship hummed around him, alive and waiting. Tomorrow they would jump to hyperspace, heading for destinations he had never imagined. There would be danger and adventure and challenges that would test everything he knew. But Tiho was not worried. He had steady hands and a grandmother's wisdom. He had a crew that trusted him. And he had Yuna, waiting somewhere on the ship with that rare smile and those unreadable purple eyes. The universe was vast and strange and full of wonders, and a human mechanic from Busan was about to discover just how much of it he could fix. As the Silent Blade prepared for its jump to hyperspace, Tiho picked up a wrench and got to work. The engine would not fix itself after all, and he had a lot of work to do. His grandmother would have been proud.